Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. And I pray you have had a blessed weekend. And I'm thankful for every one of you that are here with us on the chat on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. Thankful for every one of you. Please like the channel if you haven't already, and definitely share the link. We're going to be talking about a few things tonight, and I pray that this broadcast encourages you. Our task is always to try to give you a concise read on things that are going on in the world. And for those of you that are tuning in, perhaps for the first time with our weekly news update, we began to do these about a year ago when many of our friends and believers and brothers and sisters out there were saying that they had completely checked out of the news. And while I understand that sentiment, frankly, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of information that you may not want to even know, constantly bombarding you. So we certainly understand that. But at the same time, being completely disconnected is not safe either, because you can be caught unawares by various events, and there are trends that we're watching. So complete disconnection is not okay, but neither is being completely overwhelmed. So around here, we like to say we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. Amen. And so by being informed, we know what's going on. We pay attention, and we do what we were commanded to do, to watch, therefore. So that's important. Speaking of watching, again, for those of you here for the first time, you'll note that all of the stories that we discuss are available for your further review at remnantwatch.com. That's remnantwatch.com. You'll find the link in the description. And this is an aggregation site that we've put together as a labor of love. So thank you to Remnant House, who makes this possible, and all of our members and partners. And this is where you'll find all the stories that we discussed, not only today, but in any of our previous updates. So you can just keep on scrolling down, and it goes back in time. This is the most up-to-date stuff, and it just, as you scroll down, it just gets further and further back. So you can go over all the stories that we have discussed, any of the previous broadcasts. If you are watching, if you happen to go back and pick up some summer broadcasts or what have you, you'll find all those stories on Remnant Watch as well. And again, thank you to everyone that helps make that possible. The partners and friends of this house make that possible. So our labor of love to keep our brothers and sisters united so that we have the same information. And I want to tell you, folks, it is getting very dicey out there. And of course, there's a lot of news management now more than ever, because of the fact that the atmosphere has changed, and more people are doing reviews. There are more and more discussions going on. We're just not taking headlines for at face value anymore. And I think that's a good thing throughout the earth, that people are double checking things and asking new questions, asking harder questions. This is all excellent and all helps to maintain and helps us walk out these last days. I mean, after all, there are certain things that we can't do anything about. There are prophecies that we can't stop. It doesn't matter how much you pray, doesn't matter how much you cry. There's certain prophetic things that are going to come to pass, and all we can do is, it's kind of like Noah in the boat. The water's coming. Get ready. Batten down the hatches and get your house in order. And on that note, let's head on over to Remnant Watch. And the biggest story that we're dealing with right now, and this one is very, very concerning. When they unleashed this, we talked about this last week. We've actually talked about this throughout the summer. So those of you that have been frequent watchers of our weekly news update were not surprised by the events that we see unfolding today. Nevertheless, they are serious events. All of us need to be very conscientious of the things that are happening in our world. And we're going to be covering a lot of stories that I believe are pretty critical. This one's huge, though. I mean, we cannot ignore this. When they start releasing nuclear submarines, this is about as dangerous as it gets, folks. And those of you that are either veterans or just familiar with military equipment and military capabilities. The big guns are coming out. U.S. nuke sub arrives in the Middle East in message to Iran after threat to hit America hard if there's no Gaza ceasefire. So this was in response. This just came out today. This ran to the top of our headlines because if this thing uncorks, we're going to see we're going to have a new world real quick. The U.S. nuke sub has arrived in a U.S. nuke sub has arrived in the Middle East. The American military has said in an unusual announcement, so this is not something that is typically announced. The whole point of a nuclear submarine, a submarine of any kind, is that it has the ability to approach quietly. So the fact that they're letting you know that there is this here, it is meant to be a deterrent. That's a good sign. That means that they hope not to use it. Let's hope that they don't, because this could be very bad. The move can be seen as a deterrent to regional adversaries. As Iran said, the U.S. will be hit hard if there's no ceasefire in Gaza. And so they can talk all they want, but these are serious weapons. Our advice to the Americans is to immediately stop the war in Gaza and implement a ceasefire. Otherwise, they will be hit hard, Minister of Defense Mohammad Reza Astiani said, and he told that to Reuters. And so, again, there's some saber rattling going on, and that usually precedes the the next stage of this thing. And honestly, Saints, we have to realize that there's no way around this. We're going to go through this. This is going to be difficult, but this is what we've got up in front of us. And know that that's hard, because most people have, whisk away dreams, and they think they're not going to have to see any difficulty. But I got news for you. All the believers in Gaza right now sure wish they were getting whisked out of there. They sure wish they were getting translated out. They sure wish they were disappearing. And instead, they're having to deal with the rubble. And so we should never think ourselves more special than other people in the earth that are dealing with great tribulation. And so we should be wise enough to realize that in the same way, it could be happening to us right here. And this is going to get a lot more dicey as we go, folks, because now we're going to move into unconventional warfare very quickly. As you saw, this whole thing started with unconventional warfare. This whole thing began October 7th with an unconventional attack on Israel and some very, very suspicious activity that still hasn't been properly answered. So we can't really tell whether this is all theatrics or partially theatrics. All we know is we're going to keep watching and take a look at what Iran's response is. They're putting together recruitment posters for suicide bombers. Okay, so this hails back to the Second World War, by the way, folks. You may not know this, but there were something by the Japanese called kamikaze fighters, and the kamikaze jet fighters would fly their airplanes right into the Navy ships. So even if you're shooting the plane down, if that person is committed to killing themselves, they're going to do real serious harm on their way out. And that's exactly what they're recruiting to do. An Iranian group has put up advertisements for would-be suicide bombers. The group has asked people to register for martyrdom in Mashhad, Iran. The posters seek individuals to join a special battalion of martyr seekers. Wow. Okay. You may think that's crazy, but there's a lot of people that it would shock you how many people would sign up for something like that. A hardline Iranian group has been actively recruiting potential suicide bombers for operations in Israel, images seen by Mail Online reveal. The group responsible for this recruitment drive, Hezbollah, different from the Lebanese militant group with the same name, has initiated a campaign in the southeastern Iranian city of Mashhad, a significant place in Shia Islam. So, if the Gaza war goes against and is contrary, you can expect to see these. And if they're successful using this method, you can expect to see these. So either way, going forward, you can expect to see these. Either way. If they're successful with them, you'll see more of them. If they're not successful with them, they'll be their last hurrah. Either way, suicide bombers. That's this is where it gets wild. Okay, folks, this is it. And so understand that this is going to be a difficult time. There's just no way around going forward. There's no nice way to say some of these things. And again, if you were counseling the people in Gaza early October, what would you tell them? You'd say, "Hey, get ready. War's about to come to Gaza like you ain't never seen, and buildings are going to get blown up, and everything's going to be completely different than it is right now." And many of them probably would have looked at you like, I don't know if that's going to happen. But the smart ones would have been saying, okay, we need to get ready, right? We're going to get prepared. And guess what? There's people right now that are surviving because they knew ahead of time, let me get ready. And it's the only reason why they are, because nothing is going in there. So again, preparation, advance warning, knowing things before they happen. How critical is that? Even 1 day's notice, even 1 day to get enough water to keep your family alive, even 1 day to get out of harm's way is significant. It's significant, folks. And we can't underestimate this reality. And of course, you see a lot of posturing in the news. And if you're listening in the news in the West, you're going to hear one sort of posturing and victimhood, if you will. So it's amazing to me how people can go from victim to perpetrator, back to victim, back to hero in so fast it's not even funny. And the world's not buying it. The world's not quite following along with the narrative that is attempting to be spun by the West. And so Moscow is they're of course not on board with anything coming out of the Western media. And they made an excellent point, though. This headline was an excellent point, something worthy of consideration. Now, frankly, I think this is important for us to note, because if this is what they feel, then this makes their incursions into Ukraine very limited. Because look what they say: Moscow, as the occupying power, Israel has no right to self-defense in Gaza. Okay, Israel does not have the right to cite self-defense as a justification for its violent military operations in Gaza because it is an occupying power. Interesting point of view. This was the bombshell statement of Vasily Nebenzia, Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations, during an emergency special session of the UN General Assembly on November 1st. And so I do think that's an interesting point of view. And it says to aggressors, you can't later on cry foul when you go into, if you cross that line and you go attacking. And folks, can I just take a moment to just say this? Part of this is really bothering me. I want you to imagine that, there's some bad guys that came out of New York City and they went over to New Jersey and they grabbed 20 hostages. Okay. What would you think if New Jersey just started bombing New York and saying, we're going to stop all, food and anything going in there unless you release the hostages? We're going to skip all the police work. We're going to skip the investigating. We're going to skip cooperating with New York authorities to find the bad guys. We're going to skip all of this, and we're just going to go straight to bombing. Okay. There's the problem. And that, I believe, is what's costing serious international capital, because it looks a little too much like you guys set this up just so you could do that. I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying it looks a lot like that. Okay. And that's not a good look for Israel. Now, on the other side of this, the Hamas, this is why we don't take sides in these things, by the way, because we can see both sides have problems, and we can see the dichotomy that they like to try to create, the red-blue team. And they just want you to pick one. They don't care which one you pick. They just want you to pick one of the two teams. We're not on either side. We're here for life. Come on, somebody. We're here for life. We stand with life. That's where we stand. Okay? Not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, good and evil, good and evil, all day long, forever. Instead, we stand for life, regardless of who and what sides, because ain't none of y'all living right. As an old preacher said, ain't none of y'all living right, right? How am I supposed to sort this mess when none of y'all living right? And so it is time that we put these things down. Now, Israel is facing a much more concerted effort than it realized it was up against. And I think we're watching a massive, massive, epic fail of reading the public and what your, your sentiments out there in the public would be. So I think personally, it's just my opinion for whatever it's worth. So you can circular file it if you like. But I just think that they expected that when there was a conflict, that at the very minimum, their own people would rally around the leader, right? So this is typically what happens. And that works if you're not under indictment. That works if you're not suspected of corruption. That works if there aren't protests in the streets for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks leading up to this event. It just makes it look like a machination. So that doesn't mean, though, that Israel is not facing some serious formidable threats, because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Hamas was able to cyber hack a lot of Israel's security just prior to the event. Now, again, we're taking this news report's word for it, but this is pretty plausible when you think about it. And so there has to be some of these things, they do make sense. So it does make sense that they were able to get past certain things because of holes in the security apparatus. And so this article is going over, it's an interesting article, how Hamas cyber force hacked the Israeli army secrets. Fascinating article, certainly recommend it. Excuse me. Cyberforce was one of the pillars of 7 October in its successful role in supporting the operation, shocked and outraged Israelis despite official denials that it caused serious disruption. And so, again, Israel was attacked by a cyber attack, coincidentally with their physical attack. So cyber attacks were among the first tactics used by Hamas when it launched Operation Al-Aqsa Flood and started war with Israel. The group has a specialist unit that uses the internet as a battleground. Called Cyberforce, it's parts of Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades. Israel has described Cyberforce members as shadow soldiers, as an assassinated some of its leaders. Again, this article goes on to detail that they were able to crack through the security and were able to do a DDoS attack. And for those of you that are not tech savvy, that's called a denial of service attack. So essentially, if you throw enough activity at a website at the same time, you can overwhelm that site and bring it down. So they did this to some of the security apparatus inside of Israel, or at least that's what they're alleging they did. So it is what it is. But nevertheless, the point is that this tactic now tells you something about this new type of warfare. And this is why I wanted to bring this up, because if we in any country, it doesn't matter what the country is, if you're under attack, you can't just expect that it's going to be conventional weaponry attacks. So one of the ways that they could very much cripple a nation and do serious harm is by attacking computer infrastructure. Think about how much of your banking information, how much of your commerce information, how much of your day-to-day lives is affected by the internet, and any interruption of that process, not just for the purchasing of goods, but also for communication, also for coordination, for shipping, all kinds of things are done now electronically. So if they're able to disable these systems or compromise these systems or overwhelm them with so much attention that they go down, right, then Houston, we've got a problem. That means everybody's vulnerable. So this is a look into sort of the new generation of warfare that is coming down the pipe. Now, globally, the majority are actually shocked, believe it or not, by Israel's response to the mishandling of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And so this is kind of an interesting, thank you, Mike Adams, Natural News. Really appreciate you guys over there. And this was a very interesting point of view. The global majority, and this is true, most of the countries are just not on board. And many of them are they used to be follow the West. While in the past, the predominant Western view would have prevailed in favor of all things Israel. That Zionist-led world order is coming to a close. The Zionist-led world order coming to a close. Interesting perspective, interesting point of view, interesting notion. When I left Israel in 2015, or 2016 rather, the word I received was part of the reason why I had to leave is there was going to be a cleanse. So I've been anticipating this for some time. And I do believe that we are just now beginning to see what is going to unfold in the Middle East. So this is not even remotely over. This is going to get very dicey very quick. And you can see that they're desperately trying, I say they, meaning Israel, I believe, and I do believe other forces as well, want the United States engaged. They don't want the United States on the sideline. They don't want the United States just supplying some money. They already had that. Let's be honest. Okay? No, they want the United States not only supplying military, but being in the battle trenches with. So this is where we're going. And if you don't think so, well, here we go, folks. It's already happening. According to Military Times, relatively credible, number of troops injured in the Middle East drone attacks now at 46. So if you don't think they're serious about bringing the Americans in, you're not paying attention. Dozens of American troops sustained injuries following drone attacks on bases in Iraq and Syria on October 17th and 18th, the Pentagon spokesman told reporters on Monday. The total number of injuries now is 46. Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder said more than double the 21 Pentagon initially reported on October 25th. So we're seeing the targeting of U.S. forces, I believe in part because they want to engage. Now, we talked about this a while back, and I've brought it up several times, but I'm going to interject this here in the middle of this broadcast to remind everybody that in the middle 1800s, there was a man by the name of Albert Pike who wrote a letter to Giuseppe Mazzini and described 3 world wars, which I believe were satanically inspired, and I believe is what's controlling a lot of these events. There are people who actually believe these things, folks. So this is what makes this a spiritual war, because they're desperately trying to bring to pass something that was prophesied. Okay, so this Third World War was specifically meant to foment agitation between Islam and the Zionist state. You can't make this up. This was written in the middle of the 1800s. Okay, so this is not something that just came out or somebody just, got a word last week. No, this was written down, and it was even in the London Museum. I mean, it's been well known. It's a well-known document. It's not exactly hidden. And this is exactly what they do. It's a revelation of the method. So they have to let you know before they do something what they're going to do. And they flat told you. And it's the ultimate power statement to say, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. And that's what you're watching unfold, is a plan that was actually instigated over 100 years ago to bring the world where they believe they want to bring it. And so you're watching the culmination of a many generation plan. And so this is not a just thrown together or reactionary thing. You can get the impression when you look at certain headlines that you're watching reactions. No, you're watching a play. You're watching those who, not everybody, some people are reacting. I believe the victims are reacting naturally, but I believe the overall strategy and overall plan is being orchestrated by those that are staying within what they believe spiritually. Just like the Muslims, they believe in the Mahdi. So they're going to stay within what they believe is future events, right? So anything that helps that thought process, they're going to be in favor of. And the same thing is true with churchianity. Churchianity is looking for certain things. They were set up. Okay. So they're now their mind is, and whatever mind control you're under is going to determine how you're going to react to the very same events. Okay, so again, understand that this is the spiritual elements of this war or of these conflicts that you may not fully grasp if you don't understand the context of these spiritual forces. And so again, I only bring them up because if you get caught up in just the events themselves, you might say this doesn't make sense or this doesn't make sense. It only makes sense when you realize that there's an overarching plan that is being enacted here, and it is part of a plan that was enacted over 100 years ago, and they are just simply following it. So this goes to show you how dedicated they are to it. And they know the people know, they know the plans in the public. They know that this is not hidden. They don't care. They don't care, folks. They're going to keep right on going like nothing happened, because as far as they're concerned, who are you going to call? That's the way they look at everyone. They look at everyone saying, you know, who are you going to call? Who are you going to tell on? Tell to come get us, right? And that for 99% of the world works, except for the remnant. Okay, except for you. This is why you need to be aware, because when you hit your knees, he said, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. What's this? Them I will hear. Them I will hear, who are called by my name. So that's why you needed to be alerted of these things, because now you will act accordingly. And who can make war with the beast? Amen. You'll get the answer to that question as you fire up. And so the theater is changing now, guys. Remember how like hanging on the edge of a knife all this is. And you remember that this past spring we talked about how that there was a sudden unification or chilling of relations between, or cooling or warming of relations rather, between Israel and Iran and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is a key component in this battle, because Saudi Arabia basically controls OPEC. Okay, I mean, there's other countries, but Saudi Arabia basically controls it, in my personal opinion. And again, this is all just my opinion. But what I see is that Saudi Arabia is now under pressure to side with, the Arab states. And that explains a lot of what you're seeing. So despite their interest in doing, having a deal with Israel and having peace deals and all that, they can't look the other way here, folks. So this is now changing the landscape considerably. And Saudi Arabia is condemning Israel. Its official statements on using nuclear weapons in Gaza. One of Israel's options in the war in Gaza is to drop a nuclear bomb on the Strip. What? Said Heritage Minister Amichai Eliyahu. And Saudi Arabia on Sunday strongly condemned extremist statements made by cabinet minister in the Israeli occupation government, seemingly opening the door to the use of a nuclear bomb on the besieged Gaza Strip. So, folks, I could see there being a mass coalition of states that would form almost immediately if Israel were to actually do something like this. Like, that could galvanize a serious war. And you already see all the evidence of it right here. Erdogan wants to lead, and he was long ago rumored to be a good Mahdi potential, whatever. And again, whatever you think of these guys and whatever prophecies you think they may fulfill, the point is that this is about to get hot. Erdogan wants to lead Muslim world, the whole Muslim world, against Israel as Turkey's angry over Gaza attacks. So, and he's not backing up. They recalled their ambassador. They dismissed the Israeli ambassadors, I believe. And, they're not backing up from this. And so, they're continuing to make clear that as far as they're concerned, They don't see any other way. If Israel doesn't back up, they're going to fight. It's just the way it's going to be. And there are those cooler voices that are trying to prevail, because how many know that this is ripping apart? All of a sudden, groups that were united are suddenly divided because of this political issue. That's really not, like, this is not an American issue, but it's been become an American issue because we're involved, right? Well, guess what? Now that's going to start to divide the United States of America. And you're going to see, reaction to that. Now, Netanyahu recently rejected, after Secretary Blinkin went over there, he rejected any offers for ceasefire. He's like, I'm not playing this ceasefire game. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Friday in Israel that humanitarian pauses in fighting could facilitate hostages being released. Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog and the country's war cabinet. Doesn't matter. This is a foregone conclusion, folks. This is not a reaction. This wasn't something like, okay, maybe we overreacted. Okay, maybe we should cool down. No, this was all planned. So as a result of that, they're not going to listen to reason, because it's planned. And it's the only thing that makes sense. And so they're going to keep going. And here we go. Here we go, folks. We're going to keep seeing more and more activity in the region that's going to reshape the world. And again, you can't look past some of these things. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that we saw Gaddafi get killed, right? Because of the things he was doing in his country that would have liberated his people. So any forces that try to liberate from the old world order, well, they usually met with serious demise, right? They seriously got beat up. Well, now that power vacuum is being filled by other global forces, folks. Okay, so now look what's going on in Libya. This is not very far. It's just west of the area that we're talking about. And Putin moves to secure Libya bases in a new regional challenge for U.S. and European allies. Okay? And so there's going to be some shifting going on here. And again, remember, guys, the rise of BRICS, right? Because of these countries' lack of trust for the United States, and for good reason. There's basically a massive effort now that is going to mean that, a lot of countries that were normally allies or at least friendly to the United States are starting to turn the other way. They're not as on board. This is a bad sign, and this indicates this does not portend well for the future. And another thing that doesn't portend well, it's one thing to have a data breach, like Israel had data breaches. They had hackers who they're not sure if there were hackers or if they just have serious security issues. So they're doing security reviews, obviously, to see if they have any leakers or, traitors. So that's going on. But in addition to that, they got to plug the holes in their security, right? Well, in the United States, it's this story is so bad. And this is not a new story, folks. I hate to tell you this, especially if you have children that are in the military, or if, family that you have in the armed services. But that data is for sale, folks. So it is not hard to get information on U.S. servicemen, data on U.S. service members, and lots of it. New research funded by the West Point exposes a U.S. security vulnerability and what many see as a gap in federal law. Active duty members of the U.S. military are vulnerable to having their personal information collected, packaged, and sold to overseas companies without any vetting, according to a new report funded by the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Pretty sure that's accurate. Pretty sure they didn't make that up. And why? Because I know that through the VA, there were I've heard several reports over the years, people pulling their hair out going, I can't believe this information is available for sale. I can't believe you guys would sell this information on U.S. military personnel. This also reveals secret information that could be compromising for them, that could compromise their security, that could compromise their confidence as they go into war. I mean, if you know that your information is out on the internet and you're in another country, it's kind of hard to pay attention to what you're doing when you're thinking what might happen to your family back there. Okay, so that just created some divided focus, and that's some serious, serious danger. I mean, these are our friends and family. I'm a veteran. I know many veterans. This is just gut-wrenching to hear that this kind of information can be, ascertained without, just by paying some money. And it's not even illegal. I mean, it's wow. Just wow. Okay. So again, folks, understand that, of course, we're the remnant, we're set apart, but be aware of what's happening. This is a huge setup. There's no way it isn't. Okay. And and these things are all happening kind of at the same time. So it's not like, okay, we're just watching one event. No, there's a number of events going on at the same time. And as I've told you guys for months now, the impact of the BRICS nations, which is the other side of this, and all of those that are now standing against the Western system, it's having its impact, folks. It's chipping away at this colossus, this international megalith that's been running everything, the old order. And now now, if you've been paying attention, this just happened this week. We had a bank run, or not a bank run, a bank down, systems down. So again, it makes you wonder, was this an attack? Is this just a system failure? They always make it sound like it's no big deal. Always. They always will. But look at the banks that are listed here. Trust Bank, Bank of America, Chase, U.S. Bank, and Wells Fargo direct deposit systems down. Okay? So this was, of course, at the end of this was on November 3rd, the end of last week. And a Chase spokesperson said a system issue affected ACH debits and credits sent to us, as well as other banks. The originators of these deposits are working to resend the payment files, and we will post them as soon as we can. And we'll get that solved as soon as possible, guys. Nothing to worry about here. Don't concern yourself. It's completely okay. No problem at all. Oh, by the way, Citizens Bank has failed, and all deposits have been seized. But the rest of this, no worries at all. Don't even think about it. I mean, don't worry about it. It's totally fine. You're completely fine. Absolutely. System's perfect. Just perfect. Just everything's peachy. Just peachy. Right? I mean, that's what you think. It's like, are these people, they must really think we're that stupid. And they do, by the way. They do think you're pretty dumb. They don't think much of the public. And we had a couple of stories that came out that basically detailed this, in a Bank of America story. This one's got the most attention because it's Bank of America, so it's symbolic. It represents America, right? And they already were in damage control mode the next day, trying to make it sound like it was no big deal. It doesn't affect anybody. It doesn't have to affect a lot of people. That's the nature of a bank run, folks. All it takes is one person to not be able to get their money, and then they shout, I can't get my money. They won't give me my money. And now you got to run, which I am really suspicious that they're trying to get going, just like they tried to get a civil war going, and they tried to get other things going that didn't quite light. They were lighting this, firewood in the rain, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean they weren't trying. And so this, again, very dangerous moment, because there are those spiritually, because of the prophecy they believe, who believe they need to send the world into a complete blaze in order to get the circumstances, right, that you will accept what they want to present. So they have to give you a backdrop of a world destroyed, on fire, whatever. And then they go, hey, we have a plan, right? So we have a plan. Don't worry. We have a plan. Hey, and we've been meaning to tell you guys about our plan. And it's great. Now that you're no longer following this guy and that guy and this and that, right? Now we can tell you our plan, our beautiful, wonderful plan. So stand by for that, because that's eventually going to be at the end of this. glorious rainbow, right? And those countries that figured it out, folks, those places that have disconnected from the ether and are no longer drinking the Kool-Aid, well, they've been working very hard at putting together their own economic system so that when this one fails, they just keep right on going. And they're doing quite well, as a matter of fact. So this is dangerous for the status quo here in the West, because our systems are dependent on third world countries accepting currencies and exchanging goods. After all, we're a net importer. And I think a lot of Western nations are, if not net importers, they're close to being net importers. And Russia announces updates on new BRICS currency to counter the US dollar. We've been watching this, haven't we, guys? And here it's just continuing to expand. It could be ready for launch by next summer. Do you think it'll take until it's actually launched before it starts to dramatically affect other currencies in the earth? No, it's just the threat of it will be enough. By this time next year, the new BRICS currency should be ready, which means the days of the United States dollar dominance are numbered. Okay? And at the recent 15th BRICS summit, Sergei Glazyev, Russia's former advisor to the president and economist turned politician, announced that the formation of the upcoming BRICS currency is almost complete. Now, my understanding is they're actually dragging their feet a little bit because they're trying to get other infrastructure elements in place, and they know the impact of what they're going to do. And so if you will notice, there's a coordinated sell-off of treasuries that is happening, and it's been accelerating. So China and other countries are, Japan, they're dumping their U.S. treasuries, which is changing the yield rate. And I think that it may get more severe, so we'll keep an eye on that. But the point is that they're divesting in the West and investing in the East. Okay, so just watch, it's just common sense to watch what the trends are, right? So how does that affect the average person? Well, if things start to shift the way they are and the economy gets revalued, or worse, the Federal Reserve finally admits what we all know, that it's bankrupt. Either way, you got major shaking. Now, will the country be better as a result of that? Probably. So there's good and bad. I mean, if there was an actual revaluation and a complete shaking of the financial system, that would hurt. That would be really hard on a lot of people for a period of time. But then people would adjust. And I think that's what they're afraid of, is that if it happens where they're not in control, where they can, in a controlled manner, provide the next step, that's a dangerous spot, because the population could go in a totally different direction. And they know that. So they're really nervous about this switchover. And here's the other thing, folks, your debts won't travel. And so if you borrowed US dollars, US Federal Reserve notes to buy your house, and that's what they supposedly paid the bank, was US Federal Reserve notes, and the United States goes to a different currency, that debt does not move to the new currency. So there's a whole lot of mortgages that will go under. So these banks, their future is not good. That's a lot of why you're seeing this machination and consolidation, because when that occurs, people will be able to take the former federal dollars that are no longer worth anything, so they're worthless, so you can get as many as you want for nothing and pay off all those debts that were created in that currency that is no longer being traded. You see the damage that can be done with that. So they're trying basically to negate a jubilee. They're trying to go around a jubilee. A jubilee is, according to the scripture, where all the debts are freed. Nobody owes anybody anything, and it's time to reset. They don't want that. If a jubilee occurs in the nations, they lose a ton of wealth. They lose control. They don't have the debt hold over people that they had before. So all of these things are threatened by BRICS. Okay? So now do you understand why this is so huge, that they're doing this? Because they don't care. The people on the other side of the world, they don't care that those banks go under. They don't care if these mortgage companies fail. They don't care, because as far as they're concerned, they're already disconnected. So they have their own currencies and their own economies. They don't care what happens to this one. And you may be bothered by that, but that's reality. And the fact is that we forced other countries to care about the dollar. We did. We forced them at essentially gunpoint for them to trade dollars for oil, and dollars, dollar had to be the default. And Saudi Arabia was a key element of this, guys. Huge. Okay. So here's a question. All right. Because Saudi Arabia joined BRICS. They did not join the G7 side. Right. So what happens if Saudi Arabia ditches US dollar for oil? Hello, this is a real possibility. Saudi Arabia's induction into the BRICS alliance threatens the US dollar's prospects as the de facto currency for all oil payments. Mohammed Al-Jaddan, Saudi Arabia's finance minister, announced a week before the 15th BRICS summit in August that the kingdom was considering. So this is just a threat, just to let y'all know, okay? Considering dropping the US dollar for international oil trade. The statement ruffled a lot of feathers in the US and the Western world, but was welcomed by developing countries. So, yeah, the West was upset because you're threatening their order, their system, and it forces every country to buy dollars. So what does that do to the value of the dollar? It holds it because every country has no choice but to come buy dollars so they can go buy oil. What happens when they can take their own currency, skip the dollar, and go over and buy oil directly? That's bad news for the dollar, okay? And it's bad news for all holders of the dollar. The bad news comes in the day-to-day living. The good news comes in for debt. So it's kind of a mixed bag. So all debt that was in Federal Reserve notes gets wiped out or essentially becomes worthless. I mean, you're paying it with Confederate money, folks. That's it's not worth anything, right? And so and all fiat currency always returns to its actual value, which is zero. All of them do eventually. And so this is an inevitability. It had a long run, much longer than many even thought. And now the US dollar is in its decline. So those that, are counting on the Babylon making a rousing comeback have not read the scripture. And the people that think that this is all going to work itself out have not been paying attention. This is almost over. And when it falls, great shall be the fall thereof. And you will see the fall of mighty Babylon. Okay, so again, don't take this lightly. And one of the things that we've been talking about, we talked about it several weeks ago, and I'm going to bring up, another one of these stories that I don't like even talking about some of these stories, but we have to keep the light on, and we got to continue to press these issues in the spirit and stand united against all predation and all of those who would take advantage of our weakest, our smallest, our most vulnerable. And if you remember, there was a story that we reported on where a man, a flight attendant, had hid a hidden camera on a flight so that he could record a young girl using the restroom, and of course was arrested. And I got a note today from somebody that has a similar situation where they were also abused, and they contacted the authorities, and then because of our reporting, got the courage to report that crime. And while it may not necessarily be fully prosecuted because of the amount of time that's passed, the good thing is that people are no longer allowing this to continue. They're saying this far, no further. We're not letting you do this anymore. This kind of victimization needs to stop. And I have my own thoughts. If you go to Uncovering Demonic Doorways, Part 3, I believe you'll learn why these things are continuing to affect certain groups. They're under something that I believe is bringing this stuff to pass. And here we have another story that just it's sad. It's very sad because of its outcome. An Alabama mayor who was also the pastor of the local Baptist church kills himself after he is outed as a cross-dresser. So he had a sexual and a whatever predilection, whatever you want to call that, in a small town Alabama mayor killed himself Friday, days after a local conservative news website published a story that included photos of him wearing women's clothing and makeup. So first of all, if you are aware of the Torah, if you're aware of the commandments of Elohim, you know that it is a violation of the commandments for a man to wear the clothing of a woman. That's just what it says. I mean, your opinion, my opinion may be different, but that's what the scripture says. So this is a person who was up preaching and being a pastor, and of course that came for him. Okay, and again, I'm not. We have compassion on everybody. We don't take sides on these issues, but we can take note. Okay. And why are we taking note of this? Well, we're taking note because the atmosphere is changing. And those that are, unfortunately, again, those that have been victimized and maybe been themselves traumatized, especially as young people, it wouldn't shock me at all if I were to sit with this pastor and find out that, he went through some serious trauma as a young person, and didn't get a chance to properly process that, didn't get a chance to get that ministered to, and it started to come out in these ways. And folks, again, I'm not suggesting any kind of looking the other way on these types of crimes, but nevertheless, I do think we need to understand that we got people coming out of fogs of witchcraft at levels that are that are hard to even fathom. And I know that many of you have come out of things that you've gone, wow, I was completely deceived by this or that or the other thing. And so understand that what you're watching is all kinds of people coming out of all kinds of holes and realizing they've been deceived, realizing they've been manipulated, realizing that they have invited in that which is going to bring their own destruction. And in this case, this poor man, and I do feel sorry for him, because it ended in the tragic death. It ended in him taking his own life. And this was the demon's intention all along. And so our task, if we can do it, is to try to get in there before these things occur and get in there before these people are in these positions. And how many know that there's a whole lot of shaking that's about to go on, especially with regard to those in leadership or in positions of authority, the amount of scrutiny that they're all going to come under, the amount of light that's suddenly going to shine, and the stars will fall from the heavens. All those that people have put up on pedestals, all those that people have put, people putting their ministries and their names on it. Listen, don't promote Peter. Go promote Yahusha. Okay? We are here to promote the gospel of the kingdom. And so I encourage you all to keep people in prayer, especially those that are in positions of leadership, that they turn, because judgment begins in the house of Elohim, and that judgment is going to continue to come down. And things that they wanted to keep hidden are not being hidden. So this man did not want this out, and the hidden thing was revealed. Right? So if you're hearing this broadcast today, and maybe you're in a similar situation, and you better get some help now, right? Before it gets to this point. And so hopefully this will be a cautionary tale for somebody. Get the help you need, get the intervention that you need, get the correction that you need. If you're involved in the work of the ministry and you've got these kinds of issues, you need to seek help quickly, because there will be no mercy for you once they find out. If people find out, it is merciless. Okay, so just understand that. Get help now while you can. And I want to encourage everybody that's coming out of ditches and holes and cracks and crevices and are going, wow, was I deceived? Look, we all were. There was no one can say that we're not deceived. All the world was swayed by the wicked when all 10 virgins fell asleep. No exceptions. So nobody gets that I knew all along pass. Nobody does. Everybody woke up at some point and started to realize things in our world. So let us be compassionate. Let us be a sensitive people, a people that understand how to encourage and how to recover. Remember that he heals the brokenhearted, and he uses you to do it. And their hearts, many of them have been broken. A lot of times you'll find out as you dig, and I know I've been in ministry a while, that the damage was actually done as a child, and it didn't get ministered to. It didn't get addressed. It didn't get healed. It was paid lip service to. And here's how it came out. It may come out like that man who put a camera in a bathroom. It may come out, in some of these others that we saw with the hidden cameras and videotaping people and all of that stuff. Okay, these are crimes. These are heinous crimes. People feeling so entitled to your private moments that they can invade at their will. Okay, so we know that this is not something that's acceptable. It's not a question of its acceptability, but it's a matter of how do we treat it. And if we wait until they're caught, until this kind of level, then our remedies are limited. So be in prayer for people that are still battling, that are awakening and go, oh my goodness, I'm in trouble, or I've got some predilections, or I've got some things that came into me. I don't know where they came from or how I got here, but here I am. They need deliverance, folks. They need healing. They need fellowship with real people. They need to be walked out of that dungeon. And it's awful easy to just toss a match and walk off. Okay, it's awful easy to do that attitude and just say, just torch them. But I don't believe that's Elohim's will. I believe our assignment on the earth is to mend the brokenhearted. The leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. And they were all victimized by liars, by spirits, by evil, wicked spirits that victimized the previous generations. And it just kept coming down. So, you're absolutely right. It's perversion and perverse minded. And because they come under a perverse cover, and they came under perverse doctrines, and they came under perverse writings and things that came from the enemy that we're untwisting, but let's not deny its effect. I mean, you can take an antidote for poison, but that doesn't mean the poison isn't dangerous. So I'm glad to see that you all have the antidote in operation, and you've known his name, and you begin to walk in his ways. But how many know that there's some folks that are still operating in ignorance? Now I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. Under what circumstances would Elohim not hear a prayer? And in fact, call that prayer an abomination? Under what circumstances was somebody crying out in prayer, okay, crying out to him, saying, please help me? Under what circumstances would he ignore and call that prayer an abomination? Well, he tells us the answer to that in the book of Proverbs. And he tells us that he that turns his ear from hearing the commandments, even his prayer, shall be an abomination. And he tells us that in the last days, there will be those who will cry out to him and they will not be heard. And no matter how they cry, he will not hear them. Well, that gives us the answer. Okay. Proverbs 28, verse 9. Thank you, Octavia. And so, just understand that no one gets a pass. It's just like Cain, the same thing has to be told to everybody. If you do right, you will be accepted. If you do right, if my people, just do a word search on the word if throughout the scripture and look how many times he makes conditional promises. Conditional promises mean you do your part, then I do mine. So if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, not force me to humble them, not the same thing. So if he has to humble you, that's not the same as you humbling yourself. It's like somebody who got caught and now they want to confess. How many know we're all like this? All the grandparents, come on, grandpas and grandmas. We're listening to the grandkid trying to explain to us why the bike's broken, and they want to tell us after we caught it and after we found out, right? But how many know that we need to know beforehand? So if that same child comes ahead of time and says, hey, Grandpa, I'm really sorry. I think I broke the bike. I'm really, really sorry. I mean, that's a very different thing because the child is humbling themselves, right? What's your response? Here comes Grandpa's right now going, yep. If my grandchild comes up and says, hey, Grandpa, I'm sorry I broke this thing, and brings you the pieces, you're going to have a very different reaction to where compared to finding it broken and who broke this, right? And now you get the confession. So again, we need to grow up a little bit, right? And so our prayer is that people will not wait until they're confronted by situations that force them, but instead humble themselves. So this is the kind of way we can pray for our brothers and sisters out there. Well, I pray this broadcast has been an encouragement to you, and I am thankful for every one of you that have joined us. I want to encourage you again to join us on this coming Shabbat. We have a wonderful Shabbat service that we do every weekend, and we encourage you to join us for that. And we will be here again this time next week. Once a week, we're going to keep doing these reviews. Make sure we stay informed, but not overwhelmed. Thank you again for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.